These kids today, they live in a world of holding their phone and looking at a screen. They live in a world where they're typing LOL and not have to laugh. They live in a world where they send someone the red face emoji, but don't have to have a red face. And so movement, we allow them to become the red face emoji. We allow them to laugh until tears come out. Movement, when presented in a safe space, is really, really, really healthy for students.
That's today's guest, educator, choreographer, and movement specialist Michael Rosales, making a profound and compelling statement on why movement is essential for our students. Welcome to Music Ed Insights. I'm leadership trainer and former band director Alan Fire, here with composer and co-college music education program head Steve Shanley.
Each episode, Alan and I talk with national thought leaders in music education with practical insights for K-12 music educators.
Steve, tell us about our guest.
Michael Rosales is the founder and director of The Breakdown Camp and a nationally recognized choreographer and movement educator in the marching arts. He's worked with top drum corps like Carolina Crown, Bluecoats, the Cadets, and Santa Clara Vanguard, and he's performed and choreographed for major artists and productions around the world. Find Michael's full bio, show notes, and resources at musicedinsights.com. Alan, what was the takeaway you had from this episode?
I had never thought of statue poses as a simple, non-intimidating way for students to have fun with movement and music. How about you?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. What really struck me was Michael's reminder that movement doesn't have to be quote unquote dance. Even something as small as clapping or a unified step can transform how students feel rhythm and connect with the music.
Yes, and he makes that happen. I've had the chance to work with him and see him in action. It's amazing. He also had something deeply profound to say about texting LOL or texting the red-faced emoji. It's really cool. Members of our Insider program get to support our work on this podcast. You can learn more about that at our website. But for now, let's get to Michael Rosales.
Michael Rosales, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So I think many music teachers hear the word movement and assume that's just for marching band or show choir or maybe elementary general music folk dance lessons. It's not for me, not for my concert band or my choir or my orchestra. Why do you think movement is important or relevant for all school music programs?
Movement is literally the most important form of communication. We were moving before we could talk. We were moving, we're communicating with our bodies before we can speak any words. You know, when you're a baby and you're reaching for that bottle and you're reaching and that arm is going long, mom knows that you want that bottle and mom will grab that bottle and hand it right over to you. And then when you kind of bring it into the world of music, that's one of the first things we teach students, right? Is how to tap to kind of keep that tempo. You know, when you're listening to a ballad, you sway naturally side to side. And so it's all just being able to kind of take the music and communicate whatever message you want to get across through movement.
And I've noticed it really does seem to be a very personal thing. And you could even watch a group like, say, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, where they're all playing a Beethoven symphony. And some of them are not moving at all. They're pretty rigid in their chairs, and some of them are moving all over the place. Why do you think there's such a difference in how people in the same profession playing the exact same piece of music, for example, might approach it differently?
I think one, cultural, I think has a lot to do with that. Some cultures are more in tune with their bodies and movement, and whether it's their music, you know, the things that they do culturally, it's just incorporated into their DNA a lot more than others are. You know, when you grow up from a kid to a teenager and to an adult, and you go through this process of everyone telling you, hey, stand up straight, hey, stop moving, don't do that, then you start to kind of build these walls of like, oh, stay within these forms to be taken seriously. And so finding a way of like, hey, how can I use movement to make sure that it pushes what it is, the narrative that I'm trying to get across? That's one of the things that, you know, when I'm teaching movement, especially for marching band kids, you know, it's giving them freedom to just move as natural as possible and letting them know that this belongs to you. dance and movement belongs to you. It doesn't belong to ballet. It doesn't belong to jazz. It doesn't belong to salsa or merengue. It belongs to us. Movement belongs to us. And we should be able to kind of use that.
You bring up a couple of great points that certainly hit home with me. And the cultural component of it is one of those. I play in a Latin jazz band,
Mm.
and I love playing in the band so much. And I especially love it when we perform someplace where the audience is comprised of people from that background, because even if it is broad daylight and they have not been drinking, they will start dancing immediately. And I hate to report that even though I love this music, I know this music, if I were watching the music in broad daylight and had not had anything to drink, I would not be moving at all, probably. I would be enjoying the music, and it would take a while for me to feel comfortable enough to do that. And that goes to another point that you made, which is I've noticed at weddings, things like that, the first people out on the dance floor are little children. And that is regardless of what culture they're from. And it seems like it's something that's sort of beaten out of us, some of us. And I don't think it's necessarily a parental thing or a school thing, but I think it very much, at least in my case, is a cultural thing. You just realize, oh, this kind of isn't what people do, so I'm not going to do that. Such a great point, and something for listeners to consider as we go forward with this conversation, and the ideas that sort of, depending on where you are teaching, who you are working with, some of these things might be a little easier or faster to implement than others.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes we just need for someone to give us that green light. If you're at an event and you're listening to amazing jazz salsa music, sometimes you just need someone to go, "Hey, it's okay to move. It's okay to let that out. I know you feel it, let it out, let it out." So we just need a little bit of that green light sometimes.
So let's talk about director mindsets. Many of us, including me, feel self conscious about our own bodies and our own movement. So, how can we as music teachers lead movement confidently when we don't feel like dancers ourselves? How do you think the attitude affects how students respond?
I think it's one of those that again, peeling back what is dance versus what is movement. Like I think it's okay to stand in front of your kids and your students and just clap it out a little bit. That's movement. It's not choreography, but you know what? If we're all doing it and 200 people are clapping together with the same style, then all of a sudden you have a choreographed clap. I think being able to kind of shake things out with your kids is always good. I always start my workshops and my camps with just finding a piece of music, and I'll just do a little bit of a follow along, whether it's Earth, Wind, and Fire or an old Michael Jackson piece or, just something old that I know has a solid beat and a rhythm that is catchy. And then I just kind of sway side to side and the kids follow along. And I kind of just go a little bit deeper and I just go as far as they are willing to take it, and sometimes that gives you, oh, I can find where their comfort zone is. This is the part where they start to get uncomfortable and I'll go backwards. But finding ways to just move, whether it's clapping or punching the air and just kind of like moving with your kids. It doesn't have to be all the same. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be technical. Just finding ways to kind of shake with your students allows that door to open up.
Yeah, I think having seen Dancing with the Stars and all of the media that we consume, we see so much movement that appears to be something that we could never possibly do. So why even try? And when just now you said, well, just clapping. And I thought, oh, okay. Well, I do that. I teach jazz band. I know I'm supposed to make my students move more. I know the best jazz educators do that. I just don't do very much of it. And so much of that is because I am not comfortable with it myself. But when you said clapping, I think, oh, well, I do that. I could do more of that. I
Yeah,
could certainly make them maybe tap their heel a little bit more vigorously. I
right.
want them to move around. So I think maybe discerning between movement and dance is going to be helpful for some people.
And I think that's great.
Yeah, I remember how groundbreaking it was when we had a clinician in to work with our jazz band. I think it might have been Ed East. He's in that same band that Steve was talking about. But he just had us step to the left, step to the right, step to the left, step to the right. And I could do that. Again, I'm super self-conscious as well. I think I'm super uncoordinated. And the students, they bought into that. And that was step one. And then some of them moved just a little bit more as we went on.
Actually, you know what? I think that's a great exercise. I'm gonna have to try that. Like get in front of the band and say, okay, let's find the tempo to this music and just play something. And let's find different parts of our body to counter that rhythm, So whether it's shrugging with your shoulders to that tune, or swaying your heads left to right to that rhythm, or let's all take our elbow up and down. Just find it with your knees bouncing up and down. That's all movement, It's just kind of maybe using music and rhythm to kind of open up that gate.
And as some of our listeners, like maybe a young Alan or a young Steve right now, might be thinking, but why? Why do I need to do this? And back to your original point, Michael, that movement is everything we do and it's part of who we are as humans. I'll give sort of a utilitarian answer to to that question, which is what do we prioritize in music? What makes great music sound great to us? And what we keep going back to is it doesn't really matter what the tone quality is. It doesn't matter if they're playing right notes or singing right notes. It doesn't matter how the shaping and the phrasing of the music is if they're doing it at the wrong time or the wrong speed or they're playing the wrong rhythms. That rhythm is what it all comes back to. That stuff has to happen simultaneously when we're talking about group music making. And what better way to integrate things like steady pulse and subdivision than by letting them do so with their bodies? Have you noticed any results that way? Maybe some students who were having trouble keeping a steady beat or subdivision, and then when they started working on these types of things, those musical skills improved.
Absolutely. I think especially when you're dealing with younger freshmen coming into the marching band, making sure that they're in tune with that rhythm before you even go left, right, left, right. I think sometimes we jump that and go, okay, we're going to teach them marching technique. And they're talking about, feet placement and ankles and all these things. But if they don't have that core soul and they're not locked in with you and the rest of the band and the drums on when to move, then yeah, then you're kind of fighting your own process. Again, it's literally the most organic thing that we do as humans. And so the sooner we can kind of accept that and tune into that, I think the better for them musically.
So, a lot of us have students who say, well, I'm just not coordinated or I'm awkward. And I'm wondering if you have some tricks you've used. And in particular, I mean, this can apply to students of all ages or K 12, but I am betting that getting middle school and junior high students to buy into this might be the most difficult. That's an awkward time for them socially, physically, and they're less inclined to maybe try some things that might make them look dumb or feel dumb. So, what are some specific things that a music teacher new to this concept or new to integrating this concept into their class could maybe do in the first 5 minutes of class to just make it feel a little safe and accessible for those students?
I think kind of going back to the idea of, movement is not, it doesn't belong to a style or a genre. Even, we talked about clapping and finding the rhythm. I think those are all great ways to just kind of incorporate how to use our bodies fully. And the whole idea of awkward, I think a lot of it just stems from lack of confidence in owning our bodies and what our bodies are able to do. Because the moment a kid or a student or even an adult feels comfortable with clapping, they're going to clap louder. But sometimes it might be awkward at first. Oh my God, my hands come together. Ooh, what's that weird noise that it does? It's kind of like just going through the process. Obviously, you're not going to do a big leap into the, roll into the ground into a kick and, into a split. But as far as movement is concerned, I think just simplifying it, or, we can all kind of box in the air. Those little things are great ways to incorporate movement.
Something occurs to me as you're talking about this and thinking about the time that we worked together and I got to see you work your magic. How does it make you feel when because you do this all the time, you see students who might hate their own bodies and you see them, you get to watch them go from that feeling to moving and dancing confidently. How's that feel? See that happen?
Oh man, it's literally the greatest reward for me as a movement coach and a choreographer and a teacher, just to see a student own their space and own, what they're able to kind of do with their bodies. And we talk about this, I talked about this with band directors all the time. These kids today, they live in a world of holding their phone and looking at a screen. They live in a world where they're typing LOL and not have to laugh. They live in a world where they send someone the red face emoji, but don't have to have a red face. And so, movement in our camps, we allow them to become the red face emoji. We allow them to laugh until tears come out. We allow them to kind of do those things that it's in their heads, right? They know the feeling, they know how to type it out, but culturally, because they're on in front of the screen so often, there's a hard block on how to get that across, and they don't know how to get that out. And so, movement, when presented in a safe space, is really, really, really healthy for students today, especially for marching bands, not even just from a competitive perspective, because yes, the competitive bands and drum corps, they do all the movement. But what we see is movement is so healthy for these kids today because they need it. They need to be able to express themselves physically. They need to be able to kind of throw their arm. They need to be able to show joy to their body besides just typing, I'm happy.
So, listeners who are skeptical, you are challenged to just have the students clap, just have the students tap their heel or tap their toe, get a little bit of movement involved. I bet we also have some listeners who are saying, I'm already doing that. I'm pretty comfortable with that. What could I do next that doesn't involve ballroom dancing? How could I incorporate some movement into my concert band or my concert choir rehearsal? We're already doing some clapping of the rhythm, clapping of the beat, tapping our toe. What's a comfortable next step or two those people could take?
I guess maybe choosing a piece of music that you're working on and then finding ways to kind of move to whether it's that tempo or that energy or that space of what is the storytelling here. If we're doing a classical piece that's pretty aggressive and pretty dark, can we just play the music? Can we just play a recording of the music and let's all just pick a pose of what does this feel like to us?
Just picking a pose.
Just pick a
Again,
pose and
like something I wouldn't have considered to be movement, but that seems very attainable.
yeah, and then so you'll start to kind of connect. So when the kids start to pose where it's, like claw arms or something dark and their shoulders are lifted and they're on the ground, that translates in the music. When you see that that arm is really intricately placed there, that's an accent somewhere, or that's a run, or the levels that you'll see in the room. Hey, there's a reason why the music goes up and it goes back down. It's all in there visually, and if you're doing like a happy song, let's all pause in the middle and give me a pose. That the room changes. The room changes. And I think allowing those things to happen and acknowledging the students and giving them credit for going, thank you for allowing yourself to do that. Thank you for sharing that with me today. Gives them that green light to, hey, this is okay. This is healthy.
Alan, what do you think about turning some of this responsibility over to a student leader or two, having them modeling or suggesting for the class instead of 49-year-old Dr. Shanley up there looking weird, but instead it's one of them? Can you think of ways that we could approach this subject where having peers leading it might make it more comfortable?
Before I answer that question, I just want to say that it's okay for 49-year-old Dr. Shanley to do something also, and it's not weird.
So I can't just completely outsource this to the students.
Yeah, right. You can't. And I know that that is not at all what you're suggesting. And so I just want to make it clear to our listeners that
No.
Dr. Shanley is not abdicating his responsibility. You're reminding me of a tradition that we had the last school that I taught at Winterset. Before marching band performances, section leaders were to go have sectionals, tune, warm up, maybe hit a couple of the tricky spots in the music. Within a year, every single section had created with no instruction. This happened totally organically. They ended up incorporating some kind of dance and chant into their pregame ritual. It just happened organically and naturally. I don't think the clarinet section was like, oh, the flute players are dancing. We should do that. I think it all happened individually. And so if you went one step further than that, which is to say, okay, altos, head into the next room, create a 16 count dance that illustrates how you feel about Vivaldi's Gloria, or whatever the piece is that you're working on, or that expresses what it's like to be a part of this ensemble. Short answer is yeah, totally outsource some of this to students.
I like that. Or same concept, and maybe just to stream it back a little bit, because when you say choreography, they get a little nervous.
Yeah.
I can already feel the room
I
when I say
started to.
choreography.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But since we've already played with poses earlier, in another class, maybe go altos, go into the other room, create
Yeah.
six poses, and you're going to change poses every four counts.
Yeah.
At the end of it, when you sit back, that's choreography, especially if they're all doing the same poses and they're changing those poses every four counts, then you're doing choreography. But again, you don't say choreography, just I think trigger words and imagery is always good, especially when you're working with beginner movers, so stay away from ballet terms or the word choreography or even the word dance. I try to avoid that. So kind of finding trigger words that is not scary for them.
Yeah. So many great ideas today, Michael. Thank you. Tell us what cool things you've been up to recently.
I'm always trying to find cool things to do. Right now, this is kind of my quiet time, which means I'm just not on the road as much. So there's no drum corps or marching band happening. And so this is kind of my prep time. I've created a camp called the Breakdown Camp, which is a movement and performance camp for marching band students and programs. And we launched this in 2020, and then the pandemic happened, so it was on hold for a couple of years, and then we brought it back out. And it's been such a great joy. It brings us all such great joy, just because as a movement instructor and choreographer, a lot of times when I go to programs, I'm given what music I need to choreograph to. I'm given the amount of counts that I can do this hold in. I'm given the amount of travel that I can do. And so in these camps, us, the clinicians and the choreographers, we have free will on what we want to create with the students. And that's been a lot of fun. And also, having these conversations with both students and directors on what is movement and why it's important today, and how can we grow together as a culture and accept that movement is a great tool for us as people.
All right. And listeners, we've got a link to that up on our website. So encourage you to check that out. And Michael, can we borrow a little bit more of your time for our very, very serious lightning round questions?
Let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite restaurant in the Miami Fort Lauderdale area these days?
I'm in South Florida, so there's lots of Latin food. I can find Cuban, I can find Puerto Rican, Colombian, Venezuelan, Brazilian everywhere. And so there's not a lot of Asian food out here, but there's this really awesome Thai restaurant called Larb Thai, and it's legit good. Like you got to bring in your handkerchief because you're going to sweat a little bit.
All right. Do you have a favorite musical artist or band or group or even just a song that you want more people to know about?
I've actually been listening a little bit more to this Spanish artist. Her name is Rosalia. Man, she is just really a well-versed artist. Like she does everything from like flamenco music to reggaeton to classical music. I think it's an artist that I think musicians would be intrigued listening to.
So, South Beach seems like a dream vacation destination to me, but you live there. So, I'm curious what someone who lives in South Florida deems as their favorite vacation destination.
I moved down here because I love the beach and I love tropical weather. And so my favorite destination is, again, tie it into the food, but I love going to Thailand, with the beaches and the boats and the hills and the food.
Do you have a most memorable music performance or concert that you've attended?
When I think about performances, like my own personal performance, I remember doing a tribute to Ricky Martin during like the Latin Grammys Awards. And I was able to kind of dance in that performance. And just to be able to be on that stage with, 30 other dancers and looking out, and you're seeing, all these celebrities out there from Gloria Stefan to Jennifer Lopez, I think that just kind of is a really special moment for me.
I'm just going to give shout out to Ricky Martin. That dude still looks real good.
Yeah. For
Highlight
real.
of the Super Bowl. All right. And finally, a book recommendation for our listeners, please.
Oh, actually, I just started rereading this book recently. And some of the references I gave on today's conversation, this would be a good reference for that. It's a book called Dance Imagery for Technique and Performance by Eric Franklin. It's a great book for choreographers and teachers because it allows you to kind of take some imagery words to be able to kind of give to performers, and it translates to the most organic form where they can kind of understand it. So I think it's a great read.
Well, Michael Rosales, it's been many months since we decided you had to be on this show. Listeners, Michael and I had the chance to do something together back in the month of May 2025, where we did kind of a combined movement and leadership camp. And stay tuned, it's going to happen again. We are going to make that thing happen again. So we're working on that. Anyway, super insightful, super inspiring. So much fun to have you on the podcast today, Michael. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Music Ed Insights.
We're supported by Group Dynamic, a leading provider of youth leadership workshops. Alan works with dozens of schools each year to help develop their leaders. Learn more at groupdynamicyouth.com.
Or you could email me at alan@groupdynamic.net. Also sponsored by the Co-College Music Education Program. They've got a website too.
Just click their link at our website or email me atsshanley@coe.edu.
Also, The Normal Design, helping normal companies and people create memorable, meaningful, and professional designs and branding. More at thenormaldesign.com.
And Winterset Websites, website design and maintenance. wintersetwebsites.com.
Our Facebook page is Music Ed Insights.
Our website has program notes, links, and a one-page download of this episode's key takeaways. That's on musicedinsights.com.
You can expect a new episode most Mondays during the school year.
Get current.
Stay relevant.
Music Ed Insights.